I stood there in the pouring rain, watching my favorite sweater soak into the muddy grass, while the woman who promised to take care of my father locked the front door in my face. The sound of that deadbolt sliding home echoed louder than the thunder. My stepmother, Vanessa, stared at me through the glass pane, a cruel smirk painted on her lips, mouthing the words, "It's mine now." She thought she had won. She thought that by kicking me out onto the street less than 24 hours after my father's funeral, she had secured her future and erased my past. But as I picked up my soggy bag and walked down the driveway, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just touched the breast pocket of my jacket where a folded piece of paper sat against my heart. Vanessa thought she inherited a mansion. What she didn't know was that she was just a guest in a house that had already been sold, and the eviction notice wasn't for me, it was for her. To understand why I did what I did, you have to understand the woman Vanessa was. My father, a kind but lonely man, met her 3 years ago. I was already in my 20s, living in a small apartment across town, trying to make my own way. When Vanessa moved in, the atmosphere in the house changed instantly. It used to be a home filled with the smell of old books and my late mother's baking. Under Vanessa's rule, it became a museum of beige furniture and silence. She isolated him. Slowly but surely, the Sunday dinner stopped. She would answer his phone and say he was sleeping or busy. She was polite to my face when he was in the room, calling me sweetie and darling, but the moment he turned his back, her eyes went cold. She made it clear that I was a relic of a past she wanted to scrub clean. When my father got sick, things got worse. The cancer was aggressive. I tried to visit every day, but Vanessa made it impossible. She restricted visiting hours, claiming he needed rest. But I knew she just wanted to control the narrative. She wanted him to believe I didn't care. One afternoon, when I managed to sneak in while she was at the salon, my father grabbed my hand. He was weak, his voice barely a whisper. He told me he was worried about the house. He was worried about Vanessa. He said she had been pressuring him to sign papers, to change the will. I squeezed his hand and told him not to worry, that everything was handled. I didn't have the heart to tell him the full truth then, but I knew something he had forgotten in his sickness. The day of the funeral was a blur of gray skies and black umbrellas. Vanessa played the grieving widow perfectly. She cried on cue, draped herself over the casket, and accepted condolences with a trembling hand. But I saw the way she looked at the house keys when the service was over. It wasn't grief, it was greed. We went back to the house for the wake. The place was filled with strangers, her friends, not his. I went into the kitchen to get a glass of water, and there she was, already on the phone with a contractor, talking about tearing down my mother's garden to put in a swimming pool. She saw me and hung up, her face hardening. "You can't stay here tonight," she said, her voice dropping the fake sweetness. "In fact, you can't stay here at all. I want you out, now." I was stunned. "This is my childhood home," I said quietly. "Dad just died." She laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "And he left everything to his wife. That's how the law works, honey. You're an adult. Go find your own way. I don't want you lurking around my property." She didn't even let me pack properly. She started grabbing my things from the guest room and throwing them out the front door. The humiliation was burning my skin. Neighbors were watching from their windows. People who had known me since I was a little girl saw me being tossed out like trash. That was the moments on the lawn, in the rain. I could have fought her. I could have made a scene. But I remembered what my mother had told me years ago. Silence is the loudest scream. So I left. I stayed with a friend for a week, ignoring Vanessa's texts, which quickly shifted from gloating to demanding. She wanted to know where certain documents were, where the safe key was. I didn't reply. Instead, I went to see Mr. Henderson, the family lawyer who had served my mother and father for 30 years. He was an old-school man who hated injustice. When I sat in his office and told him what happened, he didn't look surprised. He just opened a file on his desk. You see, Vanessa made a very common mistake. She assumed that because she was married to my father, she automatically owned the house he lived in. But she never bothered to check the deed. Years ago, before my mother passed away, my mother and father made a deal. My mother came from money, and the house was purchased with her inheritance. She wanted to ensure that no matter what happened, the house would go to me. So they put the house in a trust. When my mother died, the trust became the owner. My father had a life estate, which meant he was allowed to live there until he died, but he didn't own it. He couldn't sell it, and he certainly couldn't leave it to a second wife. The moment my father took his last breath, his interest in the property evaporated. The house belonged 100% to me. Mr. Henderson asked me what I wanted to do. He could have the sheriff evict her tomorrow, he offered. I thought about it. I thought about the way she smirked in the window. I thought about my mother's garden she planned to destroy. No, I said, not yet. I wanted her to feel safe. I wanted her to settle in. A few weeks went by. I heard through the grapevine that Vanessa was spending money like water. She ordered new furniture, she hired landscapers to rip out the rose bushes, she even started painting the exterior a garish shade of modern gray. She was investing her own money into a house she didn't own. It was the trap I needed. Then I made my move. I didn't want to live there anymore. The memories were tainted by her presence, and the house felt too big for just me. I contacted a real estate investor, a company that buys homes for cash, specifically properties with difficult occupants. I explained the situation. They were used to this. I sold the house. I sold it under market value for a quick close, but I didn't care about the profit. I cared about the closure. We signed the papers on a Tuesday. By Thursday, the new owners were ready to take possession. I decided to accompany them. I wanted to see her face. We rolled up to the house around 10 a.m. Vanessa's car was in the driveway. A moving truck for the new furniture she bought was just pulling up. It was perfect timing. The representative for the investment company, a stern man named David, walked up to the door and rang the bell. I stood behind him, out of sight at first. Vanessa opened the door wearing a silk robe, looking annoyed. "I didn't order anything else," she snapped. David answered calmly, "I'm not a delivery man, ma'am. I'm the owner of this property." Vanessa laughed. "Excuse me, I think you have the wrong address. This is my house. My husband left it to me." David shook his head and pulled out a copy of the deed and the sale documents. Actually, the house belonged to the trust of the late Mrs. Miller, and her daughter, the trustee, sold it to us 2 days ago. You are trespassing. We need you to vacate the premises immediately so our contractors can begin work. Vanessa went pale. She started screaming, "That's a lie! You're scammers! I'm calling the police!" David stepped aside, and that's when she saw me. I walked up the steps, the same steps she had thrown my bags down weeks earlier. "Hello, Vanessa," I said. She looked like she had seen a ghost. You did this? You can't do this. This is my home." "No," I corrected. "It was my mother's home. Then it was my house. And now it's their house. You were just a guest, and your stay is over." She tried to slam the door, but David blocked it with his foot. He informed her that the police were already on their way to assist with a civil standby to ensure she left peacefully. When the officers arrived, the reality finally hit her. She frantically called her own lawyer, shouting into the phone, waving her arms. I watched from the sidewalk as her face crumbled. I could hear her lawyer on the other end of the line, likely explaining the hard truth about life estates and trusts. She had no leg to stand on. Because she treated me so poorly, because she threw me out without notice, the new owners had no sympathy. They gave her 2 hours to gather her personal effects before they changed the locks. The humiliation was absolute. The same neighbors who watched me leave were now watching her. But this time, it wasn't a young girl crying over her father. It was a cruel woman being stripped of her delusions. She tried to take the furniture she had just bought, but the movers refused to load it because she couldn't pay them on the spot. She had spent all her liquid cash on the renovations. She had to leave the sofas, the dining table, everything. She walked out with a few suitcases of clothes and her jewelry box. When she passed me on the sidewalk, she stopped. Her eyes were red, her makeup running. "How could you?" she hissed. "He loved me." He loved the version of you that you pretended to be, and if you had treated his daughter with even an ounce of kindness, I might have let you stay. I might have worked something out, but you wanted to take everything, so now you get nothing. She got into her car and drove away. I never saw her again. The investment company renovated the house and sold it to a nice young family a few months later. They replanted the rose bushes. I used the money from the sale to start my own business, something my father always wanted me to do. I drive by the old house sometimes. I don't feel sad anymore. I feel light. I realize that family isn't just about blood, it's about respect. And sometimes you have to burn a bridge to stop the enemy from crossing it. It's a tough lesson to learn, but greed has a funny way of blinding people to the trap doors right beneath their feet. Vanessa thought she was the queen of the castle, but she forgot to check who held the keys. I'd love to know what you guys think. Was I too harsh, or did she get exactly what she deserved? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story of sweet revenge, please make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories just like this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.